Hi, this is 3-Minute Poetry Analysis, and today I'm looking at Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. There's a lot to talk about with this poem, so this video will be longer than my previous videos. Okay, so two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. Be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. So we look at the word choice, the diction, where we see that this is an event that's happened in the past, with the past tense of diverged, stood, looked. And also, we have a very interesting description here of the wood as being yellow. And obviously, the season is the fall, but I think connotatively it stands for cowardice. So we have this event that took place in the past, and the speaker is relaying the circumstances of that event to us. And he says, I'm sorry I could not be one traveler. So long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. So the speaker is indecisive. He is afraid of making the wrong decision. So he looks down the first road as far as he can to see where it goes. Now, we have the roads will be an extended metaphor in the poem for the decision-making process in general. And often when individuals make decisions, they base their decisions on precedent. They try to discern precedent. They look at what's happened in their own lives in the past. They look at common wisdom. They look at societal norms, and they try to figure out what's the best path for me. And this is only natural that individuals would want to make a safe choice. So he looks down one as far as he can. And you would logically think that the speaker would then look down the second road as far as he could to where it bent in the undergrowth, and then balance them against one another. But he doesn't do this. In stanza 2, he says, then took the other as just as fair. Now, if you look at the verb took in stanza 2, there are some interpretations where the speaker does not take a road at all. That he takes the other as just as fair, meaning that he evaluates the other as just as fair. But in this interpretation, he's going to take a road. So he takes the second road. So he tells us that that road was just as fair. Now remember, he's looking at this circumstance. He's looking at this decision that he has made in the present light of his circumstances. He's looking at it within context. And when he recalls it in his own mind, he is recalling it a certain way. And at first he tells us that the roads were equal, that they were just as fair. Then he quickly qualifies that. And he says, well, maybe the second one had the better claim. It was grassy and wanted wear. So now he's telling us that the second road was the better road because it was the one less traveled on. It was the one that was grassy and that was inviting people to walk down it. And he was the one who was going to do it. So he's an individual. I don't follow the crowd, he's saying. So in his mind at this point, he's reflecting back upon that decision and he's saying, you know, that was a good choice, the second one. Then all of a sudden he quickly changes again. And he's equivocating. He's going back and forth, and he's saying, well, but really they were the same when, you know, as for that, the passing there had more than really about the same. So far he's gone from they were equal, or they were just as fair, to the second one was better, and now he's saying, well, actually, the more I was walking down the road, I discerned that they were the same. Now in stanza 3, he says, oh, I forgot to mention that morning there were leaves on both roads. So I really couldn't discern precedent whatsoever, and I couldn't tell if people had walked down really either road. So it was impossible really to choose because they were identical. So you would think that our speaker, if this were really this important event in his life, would be able to recall it in an accurate manner. That he would know if there were leaves on it when he first looked at both paths. But here he is going back and forth, and what I think this indicates is how individuals, when they view the circumstances of their lives and the decisions that they've made in the past, in their own minds, will change or alter the circumstances of that decision to fit the current circumstances of their lives with regard to whether or not they will take personal responsibility for what they've done. So if in this present context he's feeling good about that decision that he's made, that going down path number 2 has led to positive things in his life, he might recall that event in a positive way with regard to it was grassy and wanted to wear. However, if he looks back and he sees it differently in the sense that his present circumstances are not really as positive as he thought they would be, he might say, well, they were actually the same, so it really wasn't a choice at all. So here within stanza 2 and 3, with this equivocation, he is really, Frost is depicting how individuals rationalize the past and how they often change it depending on what is going on currently in their life. So in the middle of stanza 3, then he says, oh, I kept the first for another day, but knowing how way leads underway, I doubted if I should ever come back. So when he was going down road number 2, he said to himself, well, I can always go back, which is a good way to rationalize a decision by saying you could always go back to that point where you had to make that pivotal decision. I can always choose the other road, but then he knows that in life we never go back. So we have a speaker in the first 3 stanzas who in some ways is very unreliable. We have to question his veracity. Is he intentionally lying about the past? Is he misrepresenting it in a way to exculpate himself of all responsibility? Or is this just the natural processes of the mind, how individuals look at the past in a certain way and they change the past depending on their circumstances and how they want to perceive themselves? However, in stanza 4, the speaker tells us that in the future, he is going to represent this decision in a completely different way. No longer is he going to be viewed as a coward, or he's going to present himself as a coward. He's not going to present himself as an equivocator. He's not going to present himself as indecisive. He's going to present himself as if he's an active agent, a person who's a true individual, who has made a decision, chose the road less traveled by, and that's made all the difference in his life. And the diction changes if you look at stanza 4 in the first 2 lines, lines 16 and 17. He says, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Now, the diction here is very formal, artificial sounding, literary sounding, in the sense that he's creating a narrative. He's creating a story that he's telling. And we often do this in our lives when we present situations that have happened in the past. We will present it in a very dramatic way and often present ourselves as the hero. And the key word here is sigh, in the sense that he will be sighing before he tells the story and before he rewrites the story. And I think the sigh is a sigh of regret. Thinking back upon that road not taken. Thinking back about road number 1 and what could have been in his life. Because we see that he equivocates, and he is not too sure if that decision was the right decision. But he will be presenting it differently, and before he presents it differently, he will sigh with a sigh of regret, thinking back upon the road not taken, what could have been. But then, after the colon, after hence, he says 2 roads diverge in a wood. He leaves out yellow, he leaves out cowardice, and then he says, and I. Now, he doesn't say, and sorry. No longer is he sorry. He says, I. And then the repetition of I shows personal agency, but also with that pause there, we see that he could have reverted back to the story that he told us, but he doesn't do that. He says, I took the road less traveled by, and that's made all the difference. So he stresses his individuality. He presents himself differently to others, and he's saying that that has made all the difference in my life. So the way he presents that decision is different than how he molded over in his own mind, which shows that individuals like to present themselves in a positive